Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's FDU Alumni Webinar Series, sponsored by the FDU Alumni Association and the Office of Alumni Relations. Our topic tonight, post-election conversation, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, will feature alumnus Bart Bailey. As always, we hope everyone with us this evening is doing well, and we thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us. I do want to take a moment to share some tips for the best webinar experience. First, I want to let everybody know that we are recording this evening's webinar so we can have the replay available for those who couldn't make it this evening. We have muted all participants upon entry. However, there will be an opportunity during the program for Q&A. We ask that if you have a question for Bart, that you please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. So in order to find that, you can highlight your mouse over the screen. There's an icon on the bottom that says participants. You click on it, it will open a window, and on the bottom left hand of that window, you will see a blue hand, and that's how you raise your hand. We will call on folks based on the order in which their hands were raised, and we will unmute you. I do believe you are not able to unmute yourselves at this time. So again, if you do have a question, raise your hand, and we just ask that you please wait to be called on, and we will unmute you. We will have additional Q&A at the end of the webinar this evening, and we will run that the same way with the raise your hand feature. At this time, I would like to welcome our Executive Director of Alumni Relations and Development, Kenneth Lamb.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our alumni, faculty, staff, students, and friends of the university who took time to join us tonight. I'm very excited to have with us tonight FDU alumnus Bart Bailey, who earned his undergraduate degree from FDU in 1990 and MBA in 1999. Bart is owner and principal consultant of Courage to Care, an organization devoted to leveraging justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion to foster belonging and minimize othering. He encourages the growth and development of people, organizations, and communities by removing barriers to thought and communication. An expert on inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, Bart has worked with many organizations from nonprofits, colleges, universities, and hospitals on workshops and trainings to address unconscious and implicit bias and cultural competencies. Bart has also worked closely with law enforcement in the area of unconscious bias and helped police and community members to improve their relationship. He has also facilitated workshops with middle school students in the area of understanding, self, compassion and empathy, and recently served as a consultant with Cook Ross, the premier organization in the space of diversity and inclusion. It's my pleasure to pass the screen along and welcome to our webinar tonight, Bart Bailey.
Oh man, Kenneth, make me sound like I'm some kind of important dude here. But thank you. And we did get that FDU 90 and 99 in there, so good deal. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we're going to jump right into our dialogue. But I want to share with you that I was intentional about the 4 words that we choose there: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And most times you hear D&I, but I want to focus on what does justice really mean? What does that feel? What does it look like? And then equity, right? What do we do so that we make sure that things are equitable? And then diversity and inclusion. So that's the way I approach it, a little bit different than some other organizations, but that's just how I approach this. I want to walk forward and share with you my next screen. And really, we're talking about, why is this not advancing? You know, the opportunity, right? And this was on the intro, the invite as well. The opportunity is how do we connect with our collective humanity? Learn to let empathy and compassion rule over divisiveness and fear. And so again, there's a lot there, and I'm going to share a few things with you in terms of just how we are, and invite you to experience this quick 1 hour that we're going to be together. I would highly encourage that you find something to write with, and pen and paper, because I'm going to ask you a few questions through our time together. So find a pen and paper so you can jot a few things down that's showing up for you. And so moving forward, I want to tell you, I like to tell people what the end goal is in mind, right? So our end goal for our time together right now, is to get a sense of connection. When do we feel respected and trusted, right? That's what I mean by connection. When do we feel respected and trusted? Having that ability to truly thrive and a sense of community and belonging. And that's where, how do we learn the language to move past divisiveness so that we can have a feeling of belonging? So, and I just wanted to, I put these up front so people know. You'll see me leveraging these two books. They are some books that I used to use when I was a professor at William James College, and I just believe in them. Now, I will share with you each one of these books has its downside and a plus side, but I just believe that the plus side outweighs the shortcomings of the content. And so I'm going to ask you a few questions. So if you're hearing now, think about it. I'm going to ask you, when was a time when you felt respected and trusted? Think about those times. Whether you were inside an institution or, maybe on a sports team or whatever that thing was, what did that do for you, and how were you able to thrive? What did that give you? And then a sense of community and belonging, right? I'm going to ask you a few things, and actually we're going to just advance the slide and let's start to think about that. If we're going to talk about really moving past divisiveness, we got to know ourselves. We have to spend a little bit of time understanding who we are. And so often we use this iceberg deal, right? What's above the waterline, what's below. And so this is where I want you to write. And I'm going to ask somebody to raise their hand in a second. I want to ask you to unmute. But think about, if you look at all this stuff, what are a few aspects of your identity that give you power? What are some aspects of your identity that give you power? Before we can get to the conversation and learn how to talk to other people, we have to do our own work, right? Anybody who's been in a relationship, we got to do our own work before we can connect with another human being. You have to put your own oxygen mask on before you put one on for your child. So the question is real simple. Think about, and you can use any of the things that are on this iceberg. What parts of your identity give you power? So for me, especially doing this work, my my ethnicity, which is on the borderline, but you can kind of guess because of the dark-skinned dude, but ethnicity, you can kind of guess where I'm at in terms of that. And so for me, that gives me power to do the work that I do. And in some other circumstances, when I'm navigating in some other communities, that diminishes my power. But for me, it really gives me power to do what I need to do and navigate. And then think about what aspects of your identity diminish your power. What aspects of your identity diminish your power, right? And so if I were to just look on here, I'm one, in some ways, I would say the personal space thing, right? And so you could end up in a conversation with somebody and they get real close up to you. I like a little distance, right? And so I may start to react a certain kind of way and not be fully with present. And I learned that as you navigate in different cultures, some people like to get inside that 2-foot space, right? And so I'm so caught up in why is this person so close versus really listening to them. And so those two things, I want you to think about something that gives you power, something, a part of your identity that diminishes your power, and where and when did you first learn that aspect is important? Where and when did you learn that thing, whatever that thing is important? Right. And so for me, my ethnicity, I learned that from my parents, right? Both of them were active in civil rights. And so they said, you do not sit in the back of the bus. You sit in the front of the bus. You raise your hand. You make sure that people acknowledge you. If I have any of my professors on here from my time at Fairleigh, they know I would not put my hand down until I was acknowledged, right? And so I knew that the value of who I am is important. And so that was from childhood, from the home. And then the last one is, what does this layer of your identity, or how does this layer of your identity impact your ability to connect with someone else's humanity or not, right? And so that personal space thing that I just said, as I travel around, and particularly for me, when I first experienced somebody really getting inside the 2-foot rule, I was in India, right? And I wanted to connect with the culture, wanted to connect with people, and folks were right up there, and I was like, whoo, I feel a little uncomfortable. And that discomfort hindered me from actually listening to this person in that moment, right? And so being aware of our own self and how we show up, and do we really hold space to connect with other people's identity, right? And so I hope somebody wrote something down, write something down. What aspects give you power? What aspects diminish? Where did you learn either one of those things? When and where? And how does that help or hinder your ability to connect with someone else's humanity? So if you could raise your blue hand. Thank you, David. Can you can we unmute David? Give him an ability to unmute.
All righty. I'm unmuted. Hello, Bart.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing better for being part of this. Thank you for inviting me. I raised my hand even though I don't have an answer to your second question.
That's okay.
Well, I'm not even sure I have an answer to the third question, but I want to give it a shot anyway. And I look at this identities iceberg and I think about not so much my external identity, but my internal identity. You have a communication style in there, pretty close to the top of what looks more to me like a tooth in an iceberg, because I have to go to the dentist. So that's what it's reminding me of. But, I look at the sort of communication style as really a reflection of my self-confidence. And I think that my self-confidence certainly came from my parents encouraging me and teaching me to some degree that everybody comes with flaws and that my flaws are no worse than anybody else's flaws. So that's something I learned early, but I don't remember a moment of learning it or learning when I learned that it was important. But your final question on the slide, how does this impact my ability to connect with someone else's humanity? I think it helps a lot. I think that we tend to, when we're in fear, downplay other people's humanity. But since, my interpersonal connections are so overtaken by my self-confidence and perhaps somewhat more self-confidence than I deserve, that's what allows me to connect with other people's humanity. So I do see that as part of who I am and how I behave with other people, a reflection of, my sense of who I am.
Got it. And that's kind of the work that we want to do. And if I ask you, right, and so your communication style, you learn from your parents that's important. You stand for who you are as well. And just imagine if you navigate in spaces with someone else that does not communicate as effective, right? May you be impacted by the way that they speak or their speech pattern or whatever. You're like, I don't know about this dude, right? So just think about some of these things and they could land in ways that are positive and not, right? Because all of mine have some aspect of positive and not, right? And just really looking at both sides of that coin. Thank you. Anybody else? Let's do one more before I advance my screen. So I want you to write something. So someone else, as you think about your identities, what parts of your identity give you power and what aspects, any parts of them diminish your power? I got, how many people do we have on here? I know I have enough. Oh, 2 participants raised hand. Why can't I see that? So Chris Foster, can we unmute? Actually,
okay.
Yes.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay, so having been raised in a family, put tremendous focus on the importance of education, getting to the point in my life where I was teaching college gives me power, but not because of the role. I'm just a lecturer. I'm not, whatever. But I have a great sense of satisfaction from that, which is a kind of power. However, to me, what's more important to our discussion is that the other side of it is body image issues. And because I have such a keen sense of how incorrectly I can be judged by my book cover, it makes me very compassionate when I see other people being judged by their book covers, and so often unfairly, inappropriately, unkindly, etc.
Yeah. And that's sometimes how we connect with people, right? We go through, and I'm just going to use this word, and you may not agree with it, but sometimes we experience our own trauma and we connect through trauma, right? But how do we use that trauma not as something that's debilitating, but something that's restorative?
Right, and gives us that ability to reach out to others and listen.
Yeah. Awesome. So one more, last one, Al Nazir Blackman, if we can unmute. Thank you, Chris, for doing that.
How you doing, man?
How you doing?
Doing good. I would say that my competitive nature gives me power because throughout life I realized just going through things with other people, I realized that I'm more competitive than a lot of people, and that's pushed me to compete in areas that I may not have been as good as somebody, but sometimes I was outworking people, and that really it helped me a lot through life. Just excel in different areas.
Got it. And so that third part there, right? Where and where did you first learn that being competitive is a good thing, right? Why do you strive for that? Where did you learn that?
I learned that through playing football mostly. I was always undersized in football, and I was always overlooked by my peers.
Mm,
And I kind of used that, plus with that chip on my shoulder with my competitive nature. I kind of used that, and I worked harder than everybody. Like, I made sure to make a focus of, all right, he may be bigger than me, he may be better than me now, but I just got to keep working. And I worked real hard on my craft in terms of football, that end up helping me and getting me to college, and just helping improve my confidence. And that's when I started to really realize, like, yeah, this competitive, like, this is good. This is pushing me, and I can use this in all aspects of my life to get better.
absolutely. So now let's go to the last one. How might this competitive spirit, part of your identity, help you either connect with someone else's humanity or not? Because if I'm focused on competing against someone, does that really lend a space for connecting with other people?
I've actually realized, I'm glad you asked me that, because I've actually realized in football and in regular life, and I just realized that my competitive nature sometimes is too strong for people. Like, I
Hmm.
compete sometimes too much, and it's like sometimes I realize, like, I gotta pull back. Like, I'm annoying people. Like, it's not that serious. Like, I'll compete with my girlfriend on like little stuff that's not that serious, and it's like, all right, just relax. Like, it's a time. I gotta realize that it's a time and a place for it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you. Awesome, 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 awesome. All right, I'm going to keep going, folks. So as we advance the screen, right? And so again, I said we start with ourselves, even before we get to that whole communication piece of this, right? And so I'm going to share a few books with you, and I'm just curious, and I'm going to see if anybody's been reading any of these. If something pops out for you, I want somebody to tell me what that book is about, and I'm going to share with you. I have consumed all of them, right? And so I'm going to share a few books with you, and I'm just curious as a dialogue, right? And so if we're going on our own journey, and we're doing some work around our identity, but what are we reading now to really understand? And so Radical Dharma, this is Reverend Angela Williams, and I've watched her podcast, all kinds of stuff. Her perspective of things is pretty interesting. And so again, she's talking about race, love, and liberation. My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menaker. Uh, read his book. He and I kind of go back and forth on LinkedIn about a few things. But the way he writes is the way I facilitate, right? And so it's kind of interesting when he and I start going back and forth. But what he talks about is how we are living through some things that end up showing up in our body, and sometimes we end up blowing bad pain into each other's body versus really being restorative. Just to sum it up, our search for belonging, how Howard Ross, he's really talking about how we're more tribal than we really realize. I'll just sum it up that way. And then Black Fatigue by Mary Frances Winters, one of the icons in this space, along with Howard. They kind of have the same kind of history doing D&I work. Her book is a good book. If you're trying to understand what people of color going through, and she particularly is talking about Black folks, there's some real fatigue, right? Dying of Whiteness by Jonathan Metz. I love that book. It's just kind of interesting, right? When we get into our whole system of whiteness, of caste, of not dominant and non-dominant, people making choices that are not at the best interest of themselves because they don't want to be part of the lower caste in our society. It's just amazing. And if you really start unpacking some statistics around, even I believe in the Second Amendment, but if you really unpack some statistics around our softening of being able to get a gun, we actually have higher suicide numbers versus anything else, right? It's not we're protecting anything, but suicide numbers go up in those states where there's some real leniency around background checks. Race, Law, and American Society. Gloria Brown Marshall. This is somebody I've known, I've respected. Her perspective, I'm 52 years old. This book opened my eyes to things I thought I knew, but I did not, right? And so it talks about, she sums it up by saying this: are you aware that our laws support our values? Are we aware of the fact that our laws support our values? So when you think about it, 240 years of people being enslaved, it was legal, right? And then she just breaks it down over the time frame of in terms of law supporting our values, right? And we need to be more conscious of that. Inventing Latinos, this was the one I just finished. This book just was released by Laura E. Gomez. It's amazing. I would say these two, Gloria Brown and Laura E. Gomez, and she's a professor at UCLA, have a similar approach in terms of bringing the law into their literature. And it was an amazing book, right? And then Me and My White Supremacy. This is someone who, Layla Saad, is 28 days of journaling. And it's interesting because she's asking us, and I did it, to journal for 28 days. And she and her family are receiving death threats because she wants you to do your own work. People are getting upset about doing their own work. I just find that, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting for me. So my question is, out of the number of people we have on here, 54 individuals on this call, who's read any of them? Raise your hand and you tell me what you took from any of these books, if you've read any of them or not, right? So if anybody's read any of these, kind of raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute and just tell me what you got out of any of this content. So Samantha, go ahead. If we can unmute Samantha.
Hi, Bart.
Hello.
I have a couple of these sitting in the queue to be read, but finished Me and My White Supremacy. That one, I kind of mentioned it to you before. It's a challenging book to read, especially as a person that's BIPOC, because you start to realize that you have your own like white supremacist tendencies, especially if you like grew up in a more privileged household, or like for me, where I grew up like in the Caribbean, the lifestyle that I had in like a more upscale neighborhood really aligns like that colonial way of thinking. Things align with the book. And there's different portions in there where it has you challenge kind of your way of thinking around different topics. And for me, one of the biggest challenges were around immigration and kind of her asking you, what's your stance with immigration? And have you ever been an upstander for immigration issues? And even as an immigrant myself, it's never been a concern to me or something that I've even thought about. So it's kind of bringing things to light. And it's a good book, but it is uncomfortable in some areas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, the reason why I go here, because we start with the iceberg, right? And this is supposed to be about how do we talk past our divisiveness? If we don't do our own work, how are you going to enter the conversation? Right. And so that book, I've done the 28 days and actually working with her to bring her on to some space with one of my clients to do some work, but she will not facilitate any conversations unless the people that she's going to be interviewing have done the 28 days of journaling. You must do it, right? And so I encourage, just like Samantha is talking about, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. It is. But I encourage you, as we're talking about the divisiveness, we have to do our work. And so anybody else? Thank you, Samantha. Thank you. Anybody else? We got, 8 books here. Out of 50-something people, 53 people, has anybody else read one of these books? All right, Judy, can we unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing?
I'm well, Bart. How are you?
Good.
Thank you for the invitation to join you this evening.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of Black Fatigue.
Ah.
So that just came out a month or two ago, so it's relatively new. What I'm learning from it is how Mary Frances is putting stories to the data. Yeah. So I think data can be impersonal, and sometimes data is empowering, or it makes an impression on you, but it's her stories, especially her own story. Mm-hmm. And I'm just amazed by the authenticity and the vulnerability that she has to discuss her own experiences, but it's really having an impact on me reading the stories in addition to the data. Awesome.
So I want to ask this question then. So as you listen to the stories, is it is it something that's causing a pause for you to think about your own journey, or actually listen to her journey as it relates to Black fatigue?
It's helping me to understand for her, and then I kind of am doing a little bit of projection to other people, to the African American Black colleagues that I have, friends that I have, what their experiences are. So it's building more empathy from my perspective, because it was I haven't walked in their shoes. I haven't experienced the things that they've experienced as a white person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's built, I think it's built from an empathetic perspective. I have a deeper understanding.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you, Judith. And so I'm going to move forward, folks, onto our next slide. And I would encourage you, if you wrote down these titles, please do so. If not, we will make sure that between Kenneth, Jennifer, and myself, we will get you the titles. And I would encourage you to check them out. And so I want to go here before we get into another little piece of this and say, my question is, are you willing to explore the layers of who you are, right? What is it? Know your truth, and the narratives about yourself, right? We all have some narratives about ourselves and others that we sometimes believe to be absolute truth, right? So are we willing to do that work, right? And then know the history that leads us to this moment. And then own the truth about the past, right? I said in the beginning, as you look at our country, we're the one large country that has not really explored our past, right? We start from 1776, and I can have a conversation around that, but do we really start from 1607 in Virginia and then go to 1619 of 20 enslaved people, and then a year before the Mayflower, 1620, and then 240 years of the laws and all that institution that really led up to emancipation, and then what happened afterwards? We go to the Freedmen's Bureau, where we're trying to provide care, but 1 million out of 4 million Black folks died, right? And we get to the Dred Scott case, actually was before that, where the Supreme Court justice at the time says, Dred Scott, who was in a free state, said that no free or enslaved African American has citizenship, right? And so just imagine that. And so own the truth, right? And I think many of us don't want to talk about the history and the truth, and it's okay, but it is okay to do that. And I really encourage people, and this is touching on how we start to do this work. We got to do our own work, but listening from a place of wonder, inquiry, and learning. The ability to listen to another human being from a place of wonder, inquiry, and learning. And then the next thing is really own your impact. Please move away from blame, shame, or guilt. Nobody's doing that to you, but really, how do we really understand our impact on other human beings, right? What have we done in terms of othering people, right? Samantha talked about doing the 28 days. You start to realize that there's some behaviors, even as a 52-year-old African-American male, that align with white supremacist behaviors, right? I've done them. Own it. And then know your role. What role do you want to play this moment in time in history? I'll just say this. What kind of ancestor do you want to be, right? Somebody opens up your book, you're long gone, and some distant relative opens it up and says, oh, this is what Bart did? This is what Grandpa did? What kind of ancestor do you want to be, right? Know your role. And then deal with your bias with courage, right? Explore the aspects of you that show up in ways that are unhealthy, but have the courage to address it in your social networks, your family, friends, because I can tell you right now, many people I know, they're having these clashes inside their family networks, right? And have the courage to do that. And then the last one is engage with an open heart that welcomes community other than tribalism, right? What can I truly envision about community? What can I truly, because we're very tribal, right? I'm just going to share with, people are texting me about Pennsylvania. I live in Pennsylvania, right? 95% of Pennsylvania was born and die in Pennsylvania. And so we got 8, 9, 10 generations of people who have lived here. And when you move in from the outside, when you're second generation and you've been from the outside, you're still going to be all them people from Jersey, right? And so we're very tribal versus this thing about what is the uniqueness of these new people? How can we leverage these gifts and talents that have now moved into the area, right? How do we build a new community that's really about an open heart? So my titles and headings are just, real simple. I said, So I have a few thoughts for you. And this is, again, I'm going to look for an opportunity to unmute, folks. Going to listen for an opportunity to unmute. So here we go. I did have someone tell me that they're reading the Dying of Whiteness. Good deal. Cool. So a few questions, and you can kind of write your own answers. And then if anybody's willing to unmute and share this with us, that would be great. So the first one is, what is the purpose of fear, anger, and othering? What purpose does that serve? Actually, I want a few responses in chat. What is the purpose? What purpose does fear, anger, and othering serve anybody? What does it serve? Right? And because I want to leave time for Q&A, I got to keep track of where my clock is. Protecting yourself, absolutely. Fear, anger, othering, so protecting yourself. Anybody else? You can just put it in chat, open chat, type something. What else? What purpose does that serve? Protection. Jenny, I'm really curious, right, about that. Fear, anger, and othering. Hoping keeps information, truth within the group, instills fear. Yeah, separates and causes lack of unity. Absolutely. Reinforce pride. Got it. Bullying, establish power. Got it. Distracting, placing blame. Cool. All right. Thank you for those responses. And so my question is this: when have you been on the receiving end of fear, anger, and othering? So this is where I do want somebody to raise their hand. When have you been on the receiving end of fear, anger, and othering? So if you can kind of raise your little blue hand, open the participant list. William Arnold, can you unmute? William Arnold. Can we unmute William Arnold?
Okay, am I on now?
Yeah. So
okay, great.
Tell me about a time when you've been on the receiving end of that fear, anger, and othering.
It was 1977, man. I was 5 years old. An African American guy from Tennessee, and I was in Alabama visiting relatives, and my family lived in an interracial neighborhood. It was the first time I was ever called the N-word. And I remember going and telling my mom, I was like, Mom, I didn't know I was a N-word. And she was like, where'd you learn that word? And I said, well, the kids down the street, they told me that and told me to go back into the house. And that was my first experience of being othered, of being told that I wasn't up to par.
Got it. And that's 1979. I don't know how old you, but
I was 5. Yeah, I was 5, bro.
Right.
I'm 5.
But you can recall that incident like it was yesterday.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And how do you think that may show up today?
Say it again.
How do you think that incident shows up in your interactions with other human beings today?
For me, it continues to make me want to think about bringing people together and not othering, not separating, it makes me conscious of the languages that I use.
Yeah.
No matter who I'm around, whether they look like me, whether they walk like, talk like, act like, so, yeah.
Got it. And that's the positive side. And I'm certain, the other side, when you hear it in certain environments or you see something on TV, it brings back that 5-year-old person too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay, brother.
Wayne, can we unmute? And somebody's got to keep me on track of time here. So, because I talk way too much. So Wayne, thank you.
I grew up in a very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant environment. I had an uncle who was a very heavy-duty Southern Baptist, go to church every Sunday. And about 40 years ago, I decided on my own, because I always wanted to do it, I converted to Judaism. And I found out really quickly how I was able to all of a sudden be looked down upon. I became a member of a minority. My own family, I can remember when my mother didn't realize I was in the room and she saw something on TV and she said, "Goddamn Jews." And she realized I was there and was shocked. And that really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. And I think for me, the time when I found out that now I was not, I don't know how to phrase it, but when I would talk to somebody about a friend of mine or somebody I had met, and I just talked about them, I didn't say my Black friend.
Mm-hmm.
They were my friend, period. There was no any kind of Black or Asian or anything like that in the conversation. And I think that made a big difference for me.
Got it. Got it. Thank you, Wayne. I'm gonna go to Carolyn, then I gotta move forward because I just got notice of how much time. Can we unmute Carolyn and then I'm gonna move forward.
Hi, Bart. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I grew up. I'll say I grew up in an all Caucasian town. I'm a Hoosier, born and bred, Indiana, and I will not forget when I was in 5th grade, and there was a discussion. That's when they started talking about slavery and things like that, and the teacher was talking about Black people. And one of my classmates says, well, we don't know any of them. We don't know any Black people. And my sister and I are the only two in the school district. So the teacher says, she's looking at me, I'm looking at her. And the teacher says, yes, you do know Black people. And she goes, where? And I said, she said, right there, Carolyn is Black. Oh, really? She said, when did you become Black?
Mm.
And then she said, well, she's not like one of them, like, the people that we see on TV, committing the crimes and things like that. She went on to talk about that, so that wasn't my first taste, but that was one of the most memorable moments. And a lot of people, just because of my lighter skin, a lot of people did not know, or they just really didn't think about it because I grew up with them since, kindergarten.
Right.
So they really didn't see me as different. And then once you start talking about race, the slave trade and all those type of topics like that, that's when it became more prevalent to them. And it just was very interesting. I just remember that, how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let me ask this one question. How do you think that shows up today? Right. So that incident was that incident. So Carolyn, we went to school at the same time. Now you're
Yes.
grown, full grown woman. Now, so how might that show up and impact you today?
It still impacts me because I'm still dealing with it at work and other places where people think I'm the exception to the rule.
Mm-hmm.
I had a colleague say, well, to someone else, she's not like the other ones. And, so why can't they be more like that? And it's still happening.
Yeah.
So I would think that was when I was in 5th grade, and it's still happening. And I'm 51, and people are still saying the same thing. So we have not broadened our horizons. We're stuck in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how that makes me feel, you're trying to take one step forward and you keep going backwards.
Got it. Thank you. And Wayne shared with the current state of how he tries to navigate. Thank you, Carolyn. So I'm going to move forward, and I'm just going to ask people to put stuff in chat. William Arnold, I got that. Let me know how you want me to share that information. That's good stuff. So moving forward, so think about this though, and I'm not going to ask anybody to unmute, but when have you targeted someone else, in terms of fear, anger, and othering? I've done it. I'm telling you right now, I have done it. And so think about when we've done it. We've been on the receiving end, but when have we done that same thing to somebody else for whatever reasons, right? So just be conscious of that, and maybe jot yourself a note. When have we, targeted someone else out of fear, anger, and othering? And so I say the thing, they're like, look at this guy's titles. The thing, what purpose does compassion and empathy serve? And so write yourself a note, because I really want to get to the tools in terms of navigating. I would start to unmute people to do that again, but what purpose does compassion and empathy serve? So write something down. What do you believe? You know my process. Normally I would say, raise your hand, but I want to get to our tools here in a second, right? So what purpose does that serve? And you can write in the chat, you want to put it in. Thank you, Samantha. Connection, absolutely. Compassion and empathy serves that ability to go to connection. So you can put your answers in chat as well. Yeah. Empathy allows us to connect with someone else's humanity. And so when I get to the tools, you're going to hear me talk about empathy. Got it. Cool, cool, cool. All right. And then again, when has someone appreciated your humanity? When has someone appreciated your humanity? And think about what that felt like, right? I'm going to tell you right now, I've had a number of people, but actually there, I was sitting in a classroom and one of my professors, he said, you know, son, do you ever smile? And I was like, yeah, but I was so focused. Earlier there was somebody who was on the track team with me, and she kind of said the same thing. You never smile, right? But when he said that, he says, you know, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, I'm just focused, right? And I was focused on trying to learn. And he said, well, it's okay to smile, right? And he was seeing me and not the student athlete, and it just changed. You know, I'm not sure where Professor Thorne is now, but I remember we connected a few years ago, and it was good to reconnect with him. You remember those moments when somebody sees your humanity, right? And then when have you held space for someone else? When have you held space for someone else's humanity? And I guarantee you, you can remember, they remember you, and you can remember the impact you had on them, right? And so when we start to talk about moving from divisiveness to connection, this is the thing. This is the thing that we need to focus on. How do we hold empathetic space for someone else? How do we remember when someone held empathetic space for us, and make that contagious, right? Even in this divisive state, we can do that. I shared with somebody before, I just don't believe that that out of 330 million people in the United States, that the majority of people wake up and say, I can't wait to hate somebody. That there's no way that we think that way, right? There's some need that needs to be met, that we need to connect with each other as humanity. And so this is the tool, right? And this is the one that I use, you know, in terms of dialogue. Neither one of these are easy. Neither one of these are easy. This is labor, right? I'm not a woman. I didn't have birth. I got two sons, 27 and 17. I was in the delivery room. I noticed and witnessed some pain that I've never seen before in my life. This work right here is labor. Please don't think you're going to snap your fingers. You got to read some books. You got to do some of your own work to do this, right? And so nonviolent communications, that's by Marshall Rosenberg. I shared that in the beginning, right? What we're talking about is, what are you observing in this moment? What are you observing in this moment? And this is two people having conversation. What are you observing in this moment? What are your feelings about that thing that you're observing? Do you have a need that's being met or not? Do you have a need that's being met or not? And then can you make a concrete request to another human being? I'm going to share with you, in 2016, a friend of mine did not speak for 3 months because we voted differently. I use this tool in order for us to continue to have dialogue. But we knew each other, right? We've had enough conversations around our families. We had conversations around marriage. We had conversations around our children. We had conversations around religion. So we knew each other's humanity. So doing the top 4 was not a struggle. But empathy and honesty must be present for that to work. Must be. It's not optional. And empathy requires 4 things: taking someone else's perspective, suspending your judgment, recognizing the emotion in someone, and communicating your recognition of that emotion. Taking someone else's perspective, which is hard for many of us, especially if you're very heady because we think we know it all. And then suspending your judgment, especially when we're judgmental people. Appreciating with someone else's emotion and communicating your recognition of that emotion. That's not easy, but empathy and honesty must be present. You cannot sugarcoat, can't dance around it, got to be honest. And in difficult conversations, that's the book by Douglas Stone, Patton, Sheila Heen. It's the gap between intent and impact. Many of us, if I asked you, are you an honorable human being? You would say, absolutely, yes, I am. And honorable people can have horrible words that have negative impact on another human being. Kind people, nice people can use language that can have negative impact on another human being. We must understand that gap and be willing to get feedback, right? Be willing to hear someone say, when you said this thing, I felt this way. They use an I statement. I felt this way when you expressed that to me. And we need to be able to receive that without getting defensive, right? I'm just going to share with you, in many conversations, it's the topic, our feelings, and our identity. Topic, feelings, and our identity, right? This is the tool, folks. If we want to have compassion and connect with each other, Go back to when somebody held compassionate, empathetic space for you. Model that behavior, right? Even as, trust me, in Pennsylvania, I spoke at a Black Lives Matter event. 3 guys showed up with guns, right? And we didn't get a chance, but I know I can talk to them. I know that without a doubt, right? Because whatever that fear is, we can talk about that fear, right? So I'll just sum it up like that because I gotta be aware of time. And I'm gonna move forward. So again, this is the tool. And so I'll just sum it up with now so I can stop sharing and we can do a little bit of Q&A. What now? I said in the beginning, this is labor, right? So be prepared to go through your own journey, pain around this work. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing the work. And I don't care if you're BIPOC or not, we all need to do the work. Be ready to carry and care for this new way of being. And if you're looking for the old way, that's not going to work. It has not worked yet. We're looking for something different, right? And then truly be present, especially now, right? Many of us are so caught up in these daggone phones and doing other stuff. Be present with another human being. If you're going to put the work in, be fully present, mentally, physically, emotionally present. And then acknowledge the different starting points, right? Some of us are looking at the blueprints. Man, let me test the soil, make sure there's no sinkhole. Was this an old farm? Is there lime? And some of us are like, yep, I just want to put some window covering up, right? So we need to know that we're going to be at different starting points. My lived experience, I'm looking at the blueprints around race and racism. Someone else, they're like, I didn't even know it. I didn't know. I thought we were past that. And understand that difference, we have to get to a level playing field to have the conversation. And appreciate that some people did not see it. That's okay, right? I feel a certain kind of way, but be aware that that's your trigger, and we got to be careful with laying that on someone else. Allow folks to do the work. And then acknowledge that fear is actually a gift, right? If you're afraid, it's a gift. And I would say step into that gift. And then simply put, practice adulting and ownership. Can we be full-grown adults, right? I'm seeing many things now, and I'm trying not to be judgmental, but if I'm going to be an adult, I should not be acting certain kind of ways, right? Again, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? What legacy are you leaving behind? Somebody flips through the pages and sees your picture. What are they going to say about how you showed up this month in 2020? All right. So folks, I got a trigger that I had 10 minutes left. I think that was 15 minutes ago. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And I always like to close with this little image, right? This is down at the National Harbor in Washington, D.C. I often ask people, what do you see? They'll say, oh, it's somebody sinking in quicksand. It's actually titled The Awakening. You are going to feel the weight of the world, the weight of this moment on your chest. I need you to fight through it and wake up and step into the discomfort. And that's all I got, folks. Let me stop for a little bit of Q&A.
All right, Bart, thank you so much for presenting tonight's topics and really opening and encouraging some great dialogue about some very difficult topics that can sometimes be hard to discuss. We do have time for a couple questions. So again, if you have a question, use that raise your hand feature. While I'm waiting to see if anybody raises their hands, I do have a question for you, Bart, that came in on our registration. So this was an early submitted question. What strategy or technique could you suggest to open the eyes of others that truly don't see or understand racial injustices or inequalities?
Got it. So I love that question. And one, I always say this, if you're engaging with someone else and we have an understanding that they may not recognize racial injustice, we have to do our own work so that at some point when we invite them into the dialogue, right? I really want people to not call people out, but you're calling them in to the experience, right? You're calling them into true history. You're calling them into racial injustice. We have to do our own work so that we can truly explain this in a way that's helpful, right? So one simply could be, can you share so if they say, well, I've never seen this before, right? Or I don't believe that this thing is true. we could invite them to share with us their perspective. So can you tell me why you don't feel that this is true? What can you tell me your perspective of whatever, right? And so you're allowing this person to go from their emotional state to getting to the head and the heart to sharing their perspective. Then, depending on your level of knowledge and understanding of this moment, then you can invite your perspective back, right? But if you stay too heady and don't allow this person to get to their heart, then there might be a disconnect, right? But we have to invite them into the conversation by allowing them to give more context, right? Can you help me understand why you see the world this way? Can you share a little bit more so I completely understand, your perspective, right? And then, do you mind if I share my perspective as well, right? So it's that request, that concrete request that we're making to this other human being.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I know one of the things we talked about briefly is that we do have a big election going on right now. And knowing that our topic tonight was discussing these things post-election, although we are still mid-election, do you think if, for say, Joe Biden wins the presidency, do you think white supremacy groups or groups that hold other groups back will just go away?
Yeah. So again, that would mean that we're tying a behavior, we're tying a system and structure to one human being, which is that's just not true, right? And so for some reason, what has happened is we've lifted the lid to what was once, I there's some kind of feeling that's not right if I am treating people as less than, if I start othering people. But for some aspects of our country, that has been put on as a badge of honor, right? And so by changing the political climate, I don't foresee people saying, oh, well, I got this badge and I feel good wearing the badge. Let me put the badge away now. That's just unlikely, right? And so you're actually talking to someone in the state of Pennsylvania. You guys are waiting for us to decide how this shakes out. And I'm also in a state that has ranked number 4 with hate groups. And I'm gonna tell you right now, our ranking is not going to go away. We are not going to be less hateful with some of these things that we have. So that's just not going to happen.
Thank you. So remember, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We do have a few minutes left. So if anyone does have a question for Bart, we'd love to hear it. I do have one more that did come on our registrations. Bart, what are some ways that you can suggest to overcome the disconnect that plagues African-American organizations in collaborating beneficial goals?
So, great question. And I'll share with you, I'm going to give full disclosure, and I hope some of my friends from the Valley are on here. We actually have a little bit of that happening right now in Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. Now, the gift we have is we have an elder in our community who sees it, and I reached out to her because she sometimes calls me out and says, I need you to do this, and I respect my elders. I start doing it. So I turned the table and said, we have a little bit of division, and we have some competitions showing up, and we're not holding space for each other in a way that's honorable. Can you navigate the conversation? She said, sure, right? And so just like I mentioned to folks, we need to be aware that some people are looking at the blueprint and some people are looking at the window shade. We have the same thing inside of Black communities, right? And so some people are really at different places on their own journey around anti-racist work, their own journey around, how they have supported white supremacy. She is going to take us through a session so that we are aware of where we are, so that we can actually see each other's humanity. And so I believe you have to have somebody facilitate that, right? I just don't believe that you're going to have grown folks get in a room, acknowledge that we're at different parts of our journey, and really step up and support each other. I just don't believe it, right? I'm hopeful that we do have someone in our communities that's willing to facilitate those conversations. I'll be honest with you, somebody reached out to me and I said, right now, I don't have the capacity to do that. I could do it, but right now I don't. I think, our elder is the right person to do that.
Thank you. We do have a question that came in. David Rubenstein, I'm going to unmute you and you can ask Bart your question.
That's my buddy. He just wants to beat me up.
You know, Bart, I'm just trying to throw you a softball here. What, you know, you talk about, and I think quite compellingly, you talk about how we can create better interpersonal relationships, first by understanding ourselves, owning ourselves, and then holding ourselves open to other people. And that's real powerful stuff. But just to follow up, it ties into something you said a moment ago. We need to move society. You know, what's going on is not just about individuals. It's certainly an accumulation of individuals, but there's some things that are built into society, and there are people who are not quite ready and may not be ready for centuries to own themselves. What can we do either as individuals, or what would you like to see our society doing to make these kinds of personal development and interpersonal interactions more positive sooner rather than later?
Awesome, right? And so one of the things I offered up Resma Minikam's content, and I'll share with you that Resma talks about it's going to be 9 generations. I'm like, no, we can't do that. Now, you know, Reverend Angela Williams said, no, I don't think 9 generations. You know, we can do some other things that it is going to still take some work, right? Some labor. And so I'm going to share with you, I do believe that, and so I might as well just put the shameless plug out there. So David and I are doing some work, right? And so it's action for racial justice, right? And I believe there are a number of things that are happening across the country where people are really not just being allies, but how do I really focus on justice? And I believe that, one, us having more dialogues like this, having people committed to real change, right? I want to deal with food insecurities. I want to deal with the justice system. I want to deal with reforming police. I don't think you need to get rid of police, but reforming so that it really is about protecting and serving, right? And so as institutions talk about we want to be anti-racist, get to work, right? What actions are you willing to do inside your communities to deal with the digital divide, right? To reshape our education system, I'm gonna do a plug, to really foster real learning, right? Because many of us, even at 52, there's stuff in this book that I'm learning today, right? And so I would say, not only do we do our own work, but having groups of people that are dealing with our systems and structures in a way that's healthy. To be honest, all of us are complicit to what's happening on our border, right? If you haven't written a letter, or you haven't talked to a senator, you haven't talked to somebody, those 535 kids that are separated from their families, we have played a role in that. And what are we doing? All right.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? It looks like we're about out of time, so I do want to give a great big thank you to Bart for such a great program tonight, and being able to have some great dialogue and some great questions for those of you who participated. So thank you again, Bart, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's webinar. Please keep an eye out for a follow-up email. We like to get some feedback, and we'd love to hear what you thought of tonight's program. And I did see a question for me on the chat. There will be a recording of this available at support.fdu.edu. So you can visit there and click the link for webinars, and you'll see the recording there. It usually takes about a week to get up. Also, you can visit support.fdu.edu for alumni information, news, and upcoming events. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. Thank you again, Bart. And we hope everybody has a great evening and stay safe.
Use those tools.
Yes. Thank you, Bart.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.